Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Can you guys hear me? So I think we're going to go ahead and try to get started. I've been told that, that we've done a great job staying on time all morning, and I don't want to be the guy that messes that up. How many people just went to the HBO session next door? Yeah? That was awesome. I can't believe they made me follow that. So this is my first year at AppSphere. My name is Steve Sturdivant. I'm a senior sales engineer based out of Austin, Texas. And I just wanted to start by thanking everyone for coming to sit in the auditorium yesterday for the kickoff presentation by Jyoti and Bhaskar, and to see 1,500 people together was just outstanding, really cool. I've been at AppSphere, or I've been at AppDynamics for about 2 years now, and I've never seen, obviously, this many people all together talking about solving performance problems and what works and what doesn't work, and having the opportunity to really spend time with a lot of our different customers, you know, at dinners and hanging out. It's just been great. So thank you all for coming, and thanks for attending the session. So what we're going to focus on in this session is integrating AppDynamics processes, techniques, strategies that we can apply in highly agile software environments. So things that we can do to do a better job of managing how quickly we push code to production. So here's what I want to talk about. Number one is, why are our customer base so aggressively moving to be able to deploy code faster? Why does it matter? That's a question that we ask a lot when we talk to customers is, okay, you want to do this, but why? Why does that matter? So everybody wants to deploy code faster. They want to deploy change faster, but why? Who cares? And when we get there, what are the challenges that we need to be aware of? And with the challenges, how do we mitigate some of the risks of speed? Because there are issues that come up as you strive to go faster. If you're deploying daily or weekly or bi-weekly, there are things that we need to be aware of. And how can we leverage APM to not only align to those processes and those models, so not just how can we fit APM into those models, but how can we actually drive innovation, drive velocity, and at the same time increase quality by using APM? So how can AppDynamics help you go faster? And I've got a couple of slides, but really I want to focus on a live demo. So I want to walk through the exercise of building an application from the ground up, deploying AppDynamics, leveraging a deployment automation framework, checking in some code, continuously integrating into an environment, showing you some of these techniques in practice, and kind of putting it all together. Because what could possibly go wrong with doing a live demo with a 3 megabit shared Wi-Fi connection with 1,500 people? Okay, so here's a little bit about myself and why this is a topic that's interesting to me. I've been in this space for about 15 years as a software and a performance engineer. And most of that time really spent focused on performance engineering. I've done a lot of different things, probably like a lot of people in this room. I started out as a software developer, working on large government systems in the East Coast, doing different things with embedded systems and some pretty neat stuff. And when I got into performance engineering, that kind of led me into the APM space, initially as a practitioner, rolling out APM solutions across some fairly large organizations, and then eventually into product management. And kind of from there, I got an opportunity to move out to Austin, which is where my family's been for about the last 3 years now, give or take. And I got the opportunity to work for PayPal for a few years. And I was responsible for performance engineering for PayPal's middleware platforms. So if you've ever used PayPal to check out over eBay or go to a merchant site, or if you've ever logged in and checked your account balance, things like that, if you've ever had your money held for 45 days, I didn't do that. But what we did build was we built the middleware platform. So all of those different experiences that you had, the checkout and the account balance and the account overview, those are all different product teams. So it's a very kind of a micro product team focused structure. And all of those teams typically build their applications or their services on a middleware stack. So that middleware stack would help the application make sure that it conformed to the right architectural principles, and it was logging the right things, and it was doing the right things, and it was just generally built in the right way so that it could be quickly and efficiently deployed and then managed in production. So we owned the middleware stack and the performance of that. And the reason that I came to AppDynamics a couple of years back was obviously my background in APM and performance, but so PayPal is a great AppDynamics customer, and we use AppDynamics very successfully in our Agile continuous integration environments. And one of the things I got to see firsthand was not just how you could solve really tough problems, because performance problems are oftentimes really tough to solve, but how you could enable everybody from all across the organization, not just performance experts, to solve really tough problems. And it was really eye-opening because performance tools historically have been very difficult to use. And the model used to be that you would have a couple of guys in a room somewhere, and when somebody wanted to go and solve a problem, you'd go to those guys and they'd help you. Well, that model doesn't really scale. It doesn't work. And so seeing how AppDynamics could really be enabled through the organization and adopted from production, operations, support, development, QA, seeing that kind of traction, really, that was something I wanted to be a part of. And so that's why I came here about 2 years ago. So let's start by talking about why we see our customers so driven to adopt technology agility. And one of the neat parts about my job is that I get to work with a lot of different people, and from big to small to very high technology to more legacy systems. But I'd say one thing that they all have in common is that everybody really is trying to either adopt an Agile or a DevOps model. And one of the big reasons for that under the covers is they want a mechanism to deploy change faster, whether that's from an innovation standpoint or being able to decouple some product teams from one another, or to just have a better way of doing things. So when I was at PayPal, we went through a couple of pretty major transitions. The first was an Agile transformation where we actually broke up our product teams into Scrum teams, so across the organization, transferred the way that we delivered software to production. And the reason that we went through that was a huge undertaking, is that if you're a product team and you want to deploy kind of a micro experience, you don't want to be bound to delivering in a big mega release. You don't want to be held back. You want to be able to deliver on your own schedule and your own frequency. And frankly, PayPal wants that because they're in an incredibly competitive space. So there's a lot of people competing for payments dollars, and their ability to provide innovative experiences and functions and a better way of doing things directly impacts how many people and who and how often they use PayPal. And that's going to affect how PayPal makes money or doesn't. So the ability to support the product teams to develop and deliver code more efficiently and to deliver innovative experiences more quickly is an inherent real business value. It's a competitive differentiator for PayPal. And that's pretty important when you're competing against people like Google and Apple and Visa and everybody else who is struggling and competing for those payments dollars, whether it's mobile point of sale or online. We did a couple other things as well, some pretty major stuff. There was a lot of work to build out an embedded platform as a service capability. We wanted developers to be able to very quickly ramp up, and when they were ready to start building and testing their code, we didn't want them to have to open up 100 different tickets and wait for 3 weeks. They need to be able to get up and running immediately because that impacts their ability to be effective. And we also made a pretty major transition from a development perspective. When I joined the team in Austin, the front-end web technology of PayPal was primarily written in Java. It was on a stack called the Sparta stack, and that's what we initially supported. And during the years that I was there, we gradually kind of made a change to support and enable developers to write in Node.js. And there's a lot of thoughts about why Node.js is better than Java or Java is better than Node.js. But interestingly, one of the things that PayPal found about Node.js was that, okay, yes, it does have some scalability advantages, but there are some challenges with it because it's a different way of writing code. It's a different paradigm. Maybe some different skill sets are required, so it affects your hiring, your talent acquisition, your talent retention. So it's a big deal to make that change. But what they got out of that change was that they found that they could write code a lot quicker. They could have smaller teams that were more effective. They could decrease their team size. They could decrease their code base. And they could ultimately deploy to production faster. So all of these things, some of these major initiatives that were ongoing, were all geared around the ability to innovate and bring change to production or their integration environments faster than they could before. And the reason why that's important is because their ability to be innovative is directly going to impact their ability to be competitive and profitable. So there's a lot of challenges when you try to adopt this model and things to be aware of. And there's probably a lot of people that have seen this slide before, this picture, but this is the way that we used to do things. So when I worked on the East Coast for the government agencies, we would build stuff for 6 months, and then we would test it, and we'd throw it over the fence, and ops would support it. And then once they supported it, it was their problem. We'd go on to do the next thing. But so we can't do that anymore. So our goal to push code, to push changes faster, first thing we have to do is we have to be risk accepting. So we have to create a culture where we say, you know what, we're going to do a lot of things. We're going to make technology changes. We might make some business changes. We're going to do a lot of stuff, and some of those things aren't going to work out. We used to have a saying that people would say, the best way to introduce ideas is to think of it as shooting bullets, not cannonballs, because it takes a long time to load a cannonball, and they're really heavy, and you got to aim it, and you got to do a lot of work, and it's a big investment. And if you miss, and you've missed out on all that work, you've got to go and do it again. So the better way to do it is to have those quick bursts of, I'm going to introduce this thing, I'm going to make this change, and I'm going to do that very frequently. And we're going to figure out what works, and then we're going to use that to invest further. But we have to create a culture that says, hey, some of these things are going to be misses, and that's okay. I might drop some code in, and that breaks my system. Or I might try an idea, and it doesn't get traction, and that's going to be okay. Because if I do break something, I'm going to have processes and capabilities in place to be able to very quickly identify. So I'll have metrics available to say, hey, I just did this thing, and here is the impact of doing that. It got better, it got worse, it stayed the same. And here's how much it got worse. So I will have metrics that are defined to allow me to make data-driven decisions, not just hunches. And that's something that you heard in the session, if you attended the HBO session. A lot of what they got out of AppDynamics was the ability to get that visibility into their system, just to see what was going on, to make those data-driven decisions. And they used the platform to enable collaboration, sharing across operations and development groups. They were talking about using AppDynamics for database monitoring, and one of the big wins that they got out of there was just enabling those groups to talk to each other. You've got ops users, and you've got dev users, and you've got DBAs. And AppDynamics became the platform where all of these different groups could come together and see the same data and make the same data-driven decisions. So in an Agile model, how can we specifically align APM to enable you to go faster while still increasing quality, still maintaining quality? So I think of it in kind of 4 phases. Number 1 is the ability for our monitoring to be adaptive to our system. So the whole purpose of being Agile is to be able to change stuff. So if we change stuff really quickly, does our monitoring automatically adapt to those changes, or do we have to change our monitoring to account for the changes we're making? So if we have systems in place and we're monitoring those systems and I change them and the monitoring doesn't account for those changes, then that's a gap and that's a risk. So it's really important for our monitoring to dynamically adapt, because if it doesn't, then it's always a chicken and an egg problem. And if every time I have to go and make a config change to my monitoring, then I'm going to miss something, and there's going to be a risk. I'm not going to have visibility into those systems. When we change things, can we quantify the impact of the changes that we make, and can we drive improvements from our observations? So a really important part of DevOps and of being Agile is having those metrics in place and going through the exercise, frankly, to say these are the things that are important to us, these are the things that we care about, and when I change something, I'm going to use those metrics to determine if the thing that I just changed makes it better, makes it worse, or it stayed the same. And if it got worse, I want to know by how much, because I'm going to have to prioritize fixing that as opposed to doing something else. So it's really important to be able to, as we introduce changes in the system, be able to track the impact of those changes. And can we proactively detect degradations and notify across multiple channels? So this is something that I'm going to talk about your organization, all of our customers, they have an ecosystem of tools and processes and capabilities. And we want to understand how you guys do business today and how you leverage technology today, because we want AppDynamics to fit into that. So if and when we proactively detect a problem, we want to be able to notify you in the way that is most consumable, most usable. And finally, can we derive observation into business performance? So this is really important, and I think you've probably heard a lot about this week. This is the future of APM, and it's here now. So before, it was, we just said, oh, hey, our garbage collection is bad, or we've got a heap leak, or our response time is poor. But I think you should challenge your teams to say, okay, so what? I was actually sitting in a meeting the other week, and we were doing an executive summary of an AppDynamics proof of value, and one of the development leads sat there, and we said, hey, here's an instance where your response time was 30 seconds, and we were able to find this, and with just 3 clicks, here's the root cause of that problem. And it was awesome. I mean, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. But what was interesting is he kind of said, okay, but so what? Do I care about that? Can you tell me if I care that query just took 30 seconds? And he kind of stumped us, to be honest, because we didn't know if he cared. So the ability to take those performance observations and correlate them with the impact to the business, okay, this thing took 30 seconds. Well, here's why it matters. Here's why you should care about that. Because while it's taking 30 seconds, your users can't log in. If they can't log in, they can't use the system. If they can't use the system, they can't check out, they can't generate revenue. And here's the business impact for that technology degradation. So it's not enough to just track things like garbage collection and heap utilization and CPU. If my CPU goes to 90%, does that matter? Maybe, but it might not. Okay, so specific techniques that we can apply. So I had the opportunity to participate in a DevOps day at SPS Commerce a couple weeks ago, and the keynote speaker, Bridget Krumalt from Pivotal, who is an awesome engineer, she kind of kicked things off, and she was talking about actually how do you enable effective teamings across a global organization. And one of the points that she made was that the tools and the processes, DevOps is really an ecosystem of different things, of people, of processes, of tools. And one of the really important things when choosing tools is choosing the tools that will work together and that will allow people to truly adopt them, because that's where the value comes from. So you can have the greatest tool in the world, but if no one uses it, there's no value in having that. And you can have all of these tools that do different things, but if they don't work together, then you haven't really enabled collaboration. You just have a bunch of stuff. So we should think about APM in that same way. So APM should be a tool that is adopted by all of our users. We should enable all of our users, our ops users, our support engineers, our development, our QA. They should all be able to use our APM solution to solve the problems that they care about. And whether there's an issue and we all need to come together, having them be able to collaborate over a commonplace and set of metrics is really important. And so here's some of the things that we can do to enable that level of collaboration. So number one, deployment automation. This is something that, as people are evaluating APM solutions, sometimes they kind of skip over the operationalization concepts and concerns. So the ability to deploy AppDynamics quickly and broadly is really important, and it's really easy. I've worked with customers, we've deployed to hundreds, thousands of servers in anywhere from 15 minutes to 1 or 2 hours. So the ability to get APM up and running, you heard HBO talking about it took 30 minutes to instrument a new service. 30 minutes. We couldn't do that a couple years ago. We want to be able to tie into our continuous integration pipeline. So whether you're using Jenkins or Bamboo or something like that, we want to have a link between, hey, I'm building something, I'm deploying something, and here's the performance impact. So if and when there is a performance impact, we can tie that impact back to the specific thing that just changed. And we can leverage the REST API to do that. It's not hard, it's not overly sophisticated, it works great. So we have the ability from a continuous integration pipeline to publish events to AppDynamics, so if and when there is a change, we can say, hey, this is the thing that just broke our system or impacted our system. We want to be able to integrate with your processes and platforms in the way that people are working today. So when we go to talk to a customer, they say, well, what's it going to be like to enable us with AppDynamics, and how hard is it going to be to use? And one of the things that I would like to say is, well, what are you doing today and what's successful? Let's see how we can integrate into those processes. This is not, APM is not designed to say, hey, stop everything that you're doing now, replace all of that with APM. The right way to think of it is, how can we enable you to do your job better with what you're successful at today? And so we want to integrate into the tools that you're using. If you're using something like ServiceNow for ticketing, or we had another customer that all of their developers like to use HipChat, and that was their primary collaboration platform. So if and when that there's a notification that needs to be pushed, have AppDynamics push it to HipChat, because that's the way that their development team is going to get the most value. Don't try to reinvent the wheel and say, hey, you need to go and do this. Have AppDynamics tie into the things that they're already successful in doing. So obviously we want to create the KPIs and the health policies, and this is something that it's really worth spending the time to sit down and say, hey, what's important to us for this application? What is my KPI that I actually want to measure and monitor? And then we want to create that correlation to our business performance. All right, so I'm gonna switch over here, and what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a demo, and we're going to build a payments application. We're going to conveniently use PayPal, because I know how to do that. So we're going to start with a stubbed out web tier. So we're going to have a web interface that runs on top of Tomcat. And we're going to drop some code in, and it's going to integrate our web app with MySQL for our database connectivity. We're going to make some RESTful service invocations to a mid-tier service layer running on top of JBoss, and then we're going to integrate with PayPal. And we're actually going to use PayPal Sandbox environment. PayPal is a really easy-to-use SDK, so people like me, who know enough about code to be dangerous, can pick it up and get up and running pretty quickly. So all of our code is going to sit in GitHub, and we're going to push code live. Hopefully that Wi-Fi connection stays up and running. When we push our code, that's going to trigger our Jenkins continuous integration pipelines to process. So we're going to build the different layers in our application. We're going to deploy those out to our environment, and then we're going to push tags from Jenkins into AppDynamics. So if and when there's a problem, and given that this is a live demo, I bet there will be a couple problems. We want to be able to say, hey, these are the things that broke our system. I made these changes, and this is what broke. OK, so let's go ahead and switch over. All right. Let's go ahead and open up a new shell because my network connection dropped. OK, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy my agent out to my server farm. And it's really easy to do this. AppDynamics is open from a platform that it fits into different deployment models. It's open from a platform perspective that I can push things and pull things out. And it's really easy to take our agent and integrate that into our deployment automation framework, whether that's Puppet, we have reference implementations for public modules, we have chef recipes, we have PowerShell, and we can fit into custom deployment automation solutions as well. And so I think the philosophy is not to come in and say, hey, don't do what you're doing, do it the AppDynamics way. It's take the things that you're doing and let's integrate AppDynamics into those things. And so you can see in just about 12 seconds, oh, maybe I need to change my Tomcat template. OK. I need to change my Tomcat template. So here are the AppDynamics options. So I started off the demo with a clean Tomcat instance. And here I'm going to enable my agent and set my standard app tier no-name properties. Let's do that again. OK. So coming into this, I'll be totally transparent, I had never written a Puppet module before. It's not something that I'd ever had a need to do, and I didn't know how to do it. but I could go to the reference implementation that we have, and within a couple of minutes, I could take a look at that, I could tweak it for my environment, and I can deploy AppDynamics out to a server farm using Puppet or using Chef or using anything else broadly and widely in just a few seconds or a few minutes. And we can go ahead and take a look at what the Puppet script does. But essentially what it's doing is it's taking the agent. I have a version parameter that's saying I want this version of the agent. I've classified what agents, what servers are being, will get the AppDynamics agent. And then I push out the zip package, I unpack it, and I bounce Tomcat. That's pretty much it. And so in just 26 seconds, I've deployed AppDynamics out to my application environment. And when we go and look at the manifest, here's basically what I'm doing. So I'm picking the version. I want version 4.16 because they haven't given me access to 4.2 yet. And I am going to, I've set my app tier and my node properties, so that gets dynamically substituted into my Tomcat template. And here's my agent zip file. So I'm going to take this zip file, I'm going to push it out across my server farm. And then once I drop that agent, I'm going to unzip it. And when I unzip the agent, I'm going to bounce Tomcat. And Tomcat picks up that Tomcat template file, and it's got all my parameters, my app, my tier, and my node name. So a couple of pretty simple parameters. I could do some more sophisticated things with this, but within 26 seconds, I can deploy AppDynamics out to my environment. Now, once I deploy to my environment, you can see that here, I've got my DevOps payment processing application. Now, it's not doing anything yet, so once I start to take a load, there'll be more activity, but it automatically dynamically registers back with the controller. And so this is really important because if I was in another environment, maybe I'm starting to deploy code to the cloud, and I've got a very elastic environment with their things are coming up and down, and they're, I don't really know what's happening under the covers. The ability to dynamically deploy the agent and have it register back to the controller in real time and account for that dynamic nature of my application is really important. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to push some code. And I'm going to cheat because I've only got a couple minutes left. And I'm going to use a script to deploy my code. And so basically what I'm going to do is, let me show you the application itself. So here's my payments app. And it's pretty simple. I'm going to expose 4 different functions. The ability to check my account overview, the ability to add a credit card, the ability to pay with a credit card, and the ability to look at my account history. And if I go in and look at any of these things right now, you see that I can click on any of these functions and they work, but they're completely stubbed out. So on the left-hand side, here's the request that I'm making. I'm looking for my account information. And on the right-hand side, it shows the response back from that services layer. And it just says, hey, I've got a credit, this is where I'm adding a credit card, and this is just stubbed out. So it doesn't really do anything yet. So once I drop my code, I push my new code out to GitHub. I've got a Jenkins continuous integration pipeline. Just for timing, I'm going to go ahead and kick this off manually. Jenkins obviously has the ability to trigger pipelines based upon code check-ins. And there you go, my pipeline's already running. So I'm doing a couple things in the pipeline. I'm going to build my services tier. I'm going to deploy the services tier out to my service layer, my JBoss layer. I'm going to build the web front end, and then I'm going to trigger a deployment of my web front end out to my front end Tomcat instance. So I've got all of these steps that are chained together, and when I drop that code in, they all fire and they go deploy the updated version of my application. And hopefully, in a second, this Java checkout deploy is going to finish. There we go. It's kind of like watching grass grow. 30 seconds. OK. So now my code is deployed to my environment. And if I log back into my application, what I can see is if I click on these different things, if I click on add a credit card, now it's taking just a little bit longer. And I get a different response. So my code is live. I haven't built out the full application, but I've I've dropped a set of changes in, and I've automatically and dynamically picked those up. And so now my application is starting to provide the functionality that I expect. So now if I go back into AppDynamics, I can see my flow map looks a little bit different. I'm using a nightly, I've got this running on a nightly basis in one of our lab environments in EC2. So just for the purposes of kind of talking through this today, I obviously didn't just generate 3 hours worth of traffic. So this ran last night. You can see some interesting things that we're going to talk about. But when I pushed those code changes, AppDynamics dynamically picked up that, hey, now I've got an integration with my services tier. I'm calling out to my backend MySQL instance. And in the rush to very quickly drop code changes that may or may not have been fully vetted by our QA or performance team, it looks like I've let something slip in the environment. Now, this was a real problem that we had to deal with. At PayPal, we had basically a couple thousand developers, about 1,000, give or take, QA engineers. The ratio was right around 1 to 3. That was what they shot for. Now, from a performance perspective, there was like 14 people. I think it was one for every developer, or for every 156 developers, there was one person that was assigned to look at performance. And so it was really difficult to be able to very quickly pick up, attach to a dev team, and help them solve performance problems. You may or may not know what the code was doing. You don't have a lot of time. And you've really got to get up and running immediately. So the ability for AppDynamics to attach to an application, to dynamically discover what the transaction flow is, and to start to map out how these components talk to each other, and then scan for problems and tell me the things that are going to break in my system, this is critical for performance teams to be able to do this type of analysis. Now, I can see that AppDynamics is telling me that I've got a code problem, and I've got an awful lot of them. One of the things that I like to do is I like to look at the transaction score. So this shows me over time the performance of my transactions and how the ratio of slow to very slow request. Now, one of the things that I can see is that at 12 a.m., things were looking pretty good. And then I can see this blue tick right here. And what this is, this means that I dropped my new deployment. So using the REST API of AppDynamics, I integrated a notification into my Jenkins pipeline that says, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm deploying this code. I'm deploying my Java checkout build number 831, and this is an event that I want to tag into AppDynamics. And so when that code change dropped, you can see that all of a sudden, starting at 12:10, 10 minutes after my code was pushed, I start to see all of these errors. And so my error rate went from 0 to 14%. So immediately I know when I started to see errors, I know how many things, the rate, I can quantify the impact. 14% of my transactions are now failing, and they're failing because I just pushed this code. It was this build that impacted my application. Now, when I look at the events in the system, I can see what's happening under the covers is when I integrated my app with MySQL, there's a condition where I'm not returning a connection back to my connection pool. So I'm leaking database connections. And once I start to leak database connections, AppDynamics is looking at my shared resources and saying, hey, you've run out of resources. This is the thing that's wrong. And it tells me about those. And when it tells me about those, it does it in a way that I can easily consume this information. So it doesn't just keep the event, the alert native in the platform, although that's useful. But what's better is to leverage something like HipChat or maybe Slack, because that's what my developers are using. And so when there are technical issues that I want to alert people on, I can very quickly tell them in the way that they can take action. And this is really easily done with either the extensions that we offer, or with, frankly, the HTTP request templates are great. They more or less allow us to make a RESTful service call to any endpoint and to send data that AppDynamics knows or has to another system. And the nice thing about this is you get full context of the problem. There's all the information, what business transaction is affected, what the underlying error is. And then I think an often overlooked part of AppDynamics, a link back to the controller that basically says, hey, here's where you need to go to solve this problem. So that's how you enable people to be more collaborative using their tools and processes. You tell them in a way that they can understand, And then you give them a link that says, here, go look at this. This is the thing that's broken. Go fix it. So let's jump to our next code change. What we're going to do is we're going to fully integrate our back-end services tier with PayPal. So when we do that, when we push that code change, so we've pushed our code change, our continuous integration pipeline has triggered again, and now we have a fully integrated application connecting to our back-end services. And if we look at our business transactions, we can see that AppDynamics has said, hey, here are the business transactions that you're executing. You can check out, you can add credit card, you can do an account lookup, you can do an account history. Well, this is really important because these are the things that our users are doing. And if and when there's a problem, the first thing that we want to know is we want to understand, hey, what's impacted? We want to be able to, number one, identify that there's an issue, and then number two, isolate what business function or what server is impacted. So we can know that our online checkout is the transaction that is impacted. And we can see here, using the AppDynamics, the standard flow map and the drill down, that if we look under the covers, we've got a 13% error rate. And if we go and look at the transactions, we can see that there's an exception. And we can very quickly, within a few clicks, get down to the point where we can say, okay, well, what's going on with this one? Well, what's going on is that we have an invalid credit card exception. And under the covers yet, the problem is that we've been so quickly iterating and dropping new code that we don't have a completely working application. So we're taking all this traffic, but there are conditions, branches in our app, which aren't fully implemented. So every time someone goes to make a payment with Discover, our app throws an exception that says, hey, we're not ready for that. We can't process that yet. And AppDynamics recognizes the fact that we've got these unhandled exceptions and generates the alert. Now, what it does, this is a critical part of our application because this is how we generate revenue. Being a payments processing application, when we accept payments, we're going to take a little piece of that, and that's how we generate money for our business. So this is a really big deal. And because this is a big deal, you see that what we're going to do is we're going to take action on this event. So we can look at all of the errors that we've raised, and we can see that we've taken an action. In this case, we're going to take an action by opening up a ticket in ServiceNow. So if we go to ServiceNow, and we look at our incidents table, we can see here's the list of alerts. Now, I didn't do a very good job reining in the scope of my alert because I've got a whole bunch of them, and we really don't want this. But for demo purposes, we've raised a lot of alerts and tickets in ServiceNow, and if we click in any one of these, we can see the full set of details, so all of the context around what happened. Here's the application that's impacted. Here's the severity of the event. It's affecting our checkout process, and the reason that that's happening is because our errors per minute is greater than our condition. And I've gone ahead and assigned the ticket back to Josh Reiner, so he can take action on that. And here's the URL directly in the ticket. So when Josh logs into ServiceNow, because he's got a new ticket and it's opened at a severe level, he can take that URL and he can go right back into AppDynamics and he can go straight to the point where he needs to start looking at the problem. Right, so right back to the flow map. There's my 23% error rate. I can click on errors. I can see all of my transactions. This is a real improvement from an organizational standpoint because before, if we were generating operational alerts, a lot of times those alerts have no context to them. Hey, something's wrong, something's wrong. And I'm going to flood our operators with notifications that they don't know how to respond to. I was working with an operations team at a government organization one time, and we had just rolled out a huge set of capabilities, and we said, hey, what do you think of all this? Is this good? Does this help you? And they were like, yeah, it's okay. And we said, well, what would you really like if we could do anything for you? So we should have asked that question up front. But we asked it when we delivered the set of functionality, and they kind of came back and they said, well, I wish that you could give me a function where I could select all of my alerts, my tickets, I could right-click, and I could make them go away. So this is actionable information. I can open up a ticket. I can give people the context of the problem. I can give them a link back to the platform. Now I can enable teams to work together using their ecosystem, the things that they're already successful with. And so when you make an investment in APM, one of the things that you want to be able to do is drive adoption across your groups. Well, this is how you do it. You give them APM in the context of the things that they're already successful at doing. And you don't try to reinvent the wheel to say, okay, scrap everything and let's start from scratch. You take the things that they're already doing well and integrate into those things. Now, the final part of this is that correlation back to the business impact. So this is our checkout transaction. Our checkout transaction is our revenue generating transaction. This has real business impact to our company, but frankly, we don't know how much. Like, how many people tried to pay with Discover? How much money did this cost our business? So the analytics platform really allows us to create that correlation between application performance and business performance, business impact. So we can see every single transaction that was executed in our system over any time range. And with analytics, we can pull out the business relevant information as attributes of the transaction automatically. So leveraging the instrumentation that's already available, we can pull out information like, where's the buyer coming from? What type of card are they using? What was the total amount of their payment when they go to checkout? And the analytics interface is very easy to say, okay, let's look at all my transactions. Well, how many checkout transactions did I have over that period of time? Let's go ahead and set a filter to look at those checkout transactions. And then let's look at the visualization that shows us, okay, these are all our checkouts. So there's all the checkouts. Here's the experience by business transaction. Here's the total payment volume. So we processed or tried to process $738,000 of payments over that period of time. Here's the payments over time. Now let's focus on the ones that have errors. So let's say where the user experience is an error. What was the impact of that? Well, the impact of our checkout transactions that couldn't execute over this time frame just cost our company $137,000. So that's kind of a big deal. So now we can take that information back to the business and say, hey, I know you've got this laundry list, this backlogs of stories and bugs and defects, but we got to fix this because this just cost our company $137,000. So the impact of pushing code quickly, trying to be very innovative, and maybe having some gaps in our application, maybe having an application outage or degradation, ultimately caused our business this much money. And so now this is information that we can use to actually prioritize changes back to our system. So I think the things that I wanted to really hit in this session and leave you guys with was the importance of the dynamic nature of your monitoring. And as you're really pushing to deliver more changes at a higher frequency, it's important to be able to dynamically adapt. Number two is that we want to leverage the tools, the processes to enable people to be collaborative and enable our tools to be collaborative. Think about how you can put APM as a part of your overall ecosystem. You want to drive enablement, you want to drive adoption, this is how you do it. Create the KPIs, understand what's important to your application. If it's garbage collection, great, but understand why that's important. And if it's not garbage collection, pick out the thing that is important, measure that. So when something changes, you can very quickly go back and say, okay, I just changed this and this was the impact. And then think about how you can tie in the technology monitoring to what's important to your business. If you're in the business of processing payments, then find a way to monitor and track the payments that you're processing. And if you're in the business of selling things, then understand how the sales are going. So use the APM to correlate technology performance to your business performance. So that's what I had for this session. We've got a couple minutes left. I'll go ahead and open it up. Are there any questions? Yeah. Yeah. So there is some configuration. It's very easy in the widgets. We want to see this attribute. We want to see it over time. We want to see it as a sum. We want to apply this visualization to it. It's really easy to do. Okay. Yep. It's using the ServiceNow extension. So it's making a call. The extension under the covers makes a RESTful call to the ServiceNow endpoint. But if you go to the AppDynamics Exchange, there's a ServiceNow integration. Yeah, you can. There's additional logic we could add to be able to close the tickets as well. Yep. Okay. Yep. I'm sorry? With what? I don't know. We can take a look. We'll take a look at the extensions and see what's there. Thank you.